Okay, welcome 8B students. This is the second season of Civics in Action with Mr. McGravy. I'm Mr. McGravy, your civics teacher. And throughout the year, we are going to be doing some really cool interviews, a little talk show that I do. This one is going to be recorded, but in the future, it's going to be live, so the speakers will be on with you, but I'm just going to do a couple just to get you acclimated. So I'm thrilled today. The topic of today is the Civics in Action projects. And I know it's the beginning of the year, and some of you might not even know what civics is, but civics is the study of government and how it works, and more importantly, how you're going to use it and how you're going to apply it. So I have two former students on with me from 8B, and they were not in the civics class. They were in my social studies US history class. And they both have some experience with Civics in Action projects, not something that they did for a grade, not something that they did because they had to. It's something that they wanted to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to welcome them and allow them to say hello. So Allison Dieterman, could you please say hello to the 8B students?
Hey.
All right, that's Allison. And Caitlin Parks, can you please say hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin.
All right, great, excellent. So like I said, former 8B students, obviously I'd say C106, but some of you will not be seeing me in C106 this year because of the pandemic, and I will be going from room to room to room. But my 82 class and my homeroom, that's C106. So obviously logistics are a little bit different. So I think it would be really interesting just as an icebreaker, and I know to ask people to go back to middle school is a deep and dark place. I know it was for me, and you probably remember my stories talking about middle school was not a pretty place for me. I thought 8B, I have very fond memories of both years that I was with both of you. I thought it was great, but I'm the teacher, so obviously perspective's different. So starting with Allison, just as an icebreaker, if you can remember back, what was the best and possibly worst part of your 8th grade experience at NAMS on 8B? And you can pass on either one of them, whatever you feel comfortable. So I'll have you go first, Allison.
Sure. So my favorite academic memory of 8th grade was almost definitely the science fair. It was the first time for me that I'd really gotten an idea out of my brain and made a product with it. But my favorite non-academic memory was probably doing NAMS News. The worst part of 8th grade. Ooh, should I say it? I'm going to say it. You know what? I'm going to say it was band. The only bad part of band for me was I did band just to talk to my friends who were also doing band. Like, I hated playing flute. So I don't think that my constant talking during band really endeared me to anybody. So do what you want to do. Don't do what your friends are doing.
So Allison, I think the science teacher, she's a new teacher, but the science teacher, Miss Beaton, would really appreciate you giving a shout out to the science fair. I'm probably not going to show this to the band people, so that's okay. So Caitlin, I think I know what you're going to say for best, but who knows? Obviously, I'm a little biased, but Caitlin, you know, obviously I first met both of these young ladies in 8th grade. They're obviously completely different now than when I first met them. But Caitlin, tell us a little bit about, you know, some great memories from 8B and maybe one that wasn't so hot.
Yeah, I think you are right. My favorite was Mr. McGravy's class. I always like to give him a good shout out. And I loved whenever we had more of a unique lesson. I think he does a really good job of trying to make the lessons interactive and fun instead of just like reading from a textbook. So I think you'll all really like that this year. And my least favorite class was always gym.
Okay.
Athletic type.
And Caitlin, thank you for the shout out. I wasn't what I was actually thought you would say is you coming up to me as a young 8th grader asking to bring in a civics speaker and so Civics Day that we didn't do last year because of the pandemic. We maybe will be able to do it this year. Civics Day is when all these speakers come, and it was a whole day of celebration of civics. The Civics in Action talks are kind of like a monthly version of Civics Day. But the only reason why I'm doing these talks and why we had Civics Day is because of Caitlin as an 8th grader being bold enough and persistent enough to invite her friend, then State Representative, now Senator Diana DiZoglio, to come to speak And that's how everything started. You know, Representative DiZoglio came, she brought some judges, and then it just completely blew up, and it absolutely it is so great. So Caitlin, definitely go ahead.
So it was my first event, so everything that I did after that, I give the credit to Civics Day. So Race Amity Day and Women's Career Day that I'll talk about today,
Great.
all goes back to starting at Civics Day.
That's great. And the other thing to students is I want you to realize that while Caitlin loves civics and she's probably might go in a direction, Allison, while she thinks civics is important, that's definitely not her #1 priority. So I think what's cool with Allison being here is she can talk to as someone who maybe doesn't love history and civics, but yet recognizes its importance. So what that means to all of you as students is I understand that civics probably isn't going to, might not be your favorite class, or you might not have a career in it, but it's definitely something you need. And I think both these perspectives will represent you, the students, and that's why I asked Caitlin and Allison on here today. So I think it's really important for both of you to just briefly talk about, we knew where you were before, but I think everyone wants to know, like, what's going on now? You both have a lot going on. You both have, it's a really exciting time in your life. Very proud of hearing about all the great things you're doing. So Allison, do you want to go first and just tell us a little bit about where you are and where you're at right now?
Sure. So right now I'm at the University of Connecticut as a biomedical engineering student. I had to quarantine on campus for 2 weeks before classes actually started, so I've been here for about a month tomorrow. I've been vlogging a little bit, mostly to stave off the crushing boredom. But now that things have opened up, I've been doing some more stuff. I've been joining some organizations on campus. Recently, I just joined the Engineers Without Borders, which is an organization who empowers communities to meet their own basic needs.
Allison, I have to give you a plug, and I know it's more of a language arts related thing, but you are also a recent published author. Yes. And could you just, I want you to give a little plug for your book, and please talk about it just for a second. You want to just talk about that?
I totally will. So I wrote a book this April. It was published April 18th, and it's a middle grade fiction book. It's called Goat on the Lamb, and it is available on Amazon. It's about a middle school girl who lives on a goat farm in Oklahoma, and it's about the trials and tribulations that she goes through trying to save her favorite goat.
That's so cool. And students, please let me know if you're interested. I will totally connect you with that book and all the other things that go along with it. So that's good.
We needed some copies to North Andover Middle School.
Oh, that would be great. That would be fantastic. Teacher.
Read the book. There should be some signed copies available for you there.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So, Caitlin, for freshman year of college, you had a very unique year. You were a subject of another episode with Alexa Pascucci, another former 8B student. Obviously, the pandemic. Before the pandemic, students, Caitlin was living the dream of being an intern at DC for Congressman Seth Moulton. And so huge first year. So do you want to just share a little bit about last year? I know you've been doing some civics works over the summer, and then talk about what you're doing now, Caitlin. I think it's really interesting. I think the kids would love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a sophomore at American University. I'm studying political science with a focus in American government. I'm currently in my apartment in DC, but all of our classes are online. So I'm still in the city, but not going on campus. In my past, I worked at the Massachusetts State House for 4 years for then State Representative Diana DiZoglio, and I was the field director on her state Senate campaign. I just finished up being the campaign manager for State Representative Christina Minicucci, and when I was here last year, I was interning on Capitol Hill for Seth Moulton, as Mr. McGravy said, and then that unfortunately got cut short because of the pandemic. And it looks like I might be interning in the Senate at some point here in DC whenever things start to open up again.
Oh, that's fantastic. And students, I want to let you know that Caitlin was actually Civics in Action talks when we did them live. Caitlin was actually a guest with a very cool Civic speaker who I'm going to have in virtually, Mr. Ryan Hamilton from Methuen. So Caitlin has been very supportive of the program. And I also, Caitlin really made a huge connection to try to get Congressman Seth Moulton to come to NAMS. And she was successful in pulling that off. And sadly, he was supposed to come March 17th. And of course, he couldn't because of the pandemic. But he did do a Civics in Action talk with me and got to do a graduation remark to all the 8B students from last year. So Caitlin, that was a huge, huge deal for the kids.
Yeah,
and
we'll work on getting him in there whenever things open up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so students, now that you know Allison and Caitlin, I think it's important for us to talk about a Civics Action project. This is something that you're going to have to do at the end of the year. Allison talked about a science fair. It's kind of like that, but you pick a topic that you're interested in, you do research, and then you try to do something about it. One of the reasons why I have these two young ladies with us is both of them did a Civics Action project, as I talked about at the beginning of the show. Both of them, especially if you stay in North Andover, will impact both of you. One is the gorgeous courtyard at the North Andover Middle School, and it was not always the most gorgeous used facility at NAMS, and Allison's going to talk a little bit about that. And then Caitlin's already hinted at some of the programs that she started at the North Andover High School, Women Career Day and Race Amity Day, that she's going to talk about. So all I'm going to ask you to do right now, ladies, before we start getting kind of to the civics lesson, is just tell me a little bit about what your project was and why did you do it? If you could just answer those two things. So Allison, I'm going to let you talk first about the courtyard project. And Allison didn't, she wasn't responsible for the creation of the courtyard. She gave the courtyard a complete a fix-up that we enjoy today. So Allison, I'm going to let you talk about that, please.
Sure. So when I was in 6th grade, I wanted to install a garden in the courtyard. I pitched the original idea, which I'm pretty sure included like electric coyote fences and stuff, to Mr. Richard. And then over the next 3 years, I worked really closely with him and some other awesome people to install the garden beds and the outdoor classroom and the Miss Sweetra Memorial in the middle school courtyard. And this was really important to me because I know coming from an elementary school with a garden and with long recess times, I wanted to find a way to get students outside for longer periods of time and to just make something a little more beautiful that we all see every day.
Great. So obviously Allison, was a very inquisitive student, and like many students, I would always get questions. Now, I went to middle school a long time ago at that school, and that courtyard was something that we could use on a regular basis. We'd go there for recess, we'd cut through, and then when I became a teacher, 20-something years ago, none of my students could use the courtyard, and I did not know why. It was like it had completely shut down. And I think students would always say, why don't we use the courtyard? And Allison would say it, but Allison took it to the next level where she was like, well, what can we do to make this a resource at NAMS? And we'll talk a little more about that process in a minute, but it's really, and the other thing too is, there's a classroom in there now. There's definitely, it looks a lot nicer than it did before. And it's just a beautiful resource that a lot of people didn't even know about until Allison took advantage of that. The doors were locked and it was very, you could see it in your classrooms, but it was this unknown. Okay, so Caitlin, after NAMS, you went to the high school, North Andover High School, and you definitely took on a lot as a student. Yeah, so if you want to talk about those two things that you did, which just tell us a little about what they were and what they currently are today, because they're still going on, and why'd you do them? Why'd you do them?
Yeah, so at the high school, I worked very closely with Mr. Sheehy, sort of my Mr. McGravy at the high school. And we had the opportunity to go to the National Race Amity Conference, which takes place in Boston every year. And they were able to send, I think, 4 or 5 students from the high school to that conference, and I was lucky enough to attend. And when we were there, we learned a lot about, how to encourage your community to kind of accept everybody else's culture and try to, really make sure that everybody feels welcome and, safe in their community despite their race, their ethnicity, their religion. So what we did is we took those ideas from the conference and we brought them back to North Andover High School. In Massachusetts, I believe it's the second Sunday of every June is statewide Race Amity Day. That's a proclamation from Governor Baker. So we wanted to make our own little North Andover event where students could put on activities. We had food, dancing from all different cultures, booths set up. We had outside groups come in to give lessons about their culture and ethnicity. And if any of you in 8th grade were a part of ADL, then you guys were awesome and helped us out last year. And ADL set up a booth, and they were awesome. So,
before Caitlin, just for people that, could you just define race amity? Could you just define that for the kids, just so they know what it is?
Yeah, the word amity is almost like an old English word for friendship. So it's race friendship. It's basically just about accepting everybody, trying to learn about, the people around you, their culture and their ethnicity, and just being kind and accepting everybody for who they are. The friendship among the races.
Great. And do you want to just give a quick plug to the second thing that you did as well?
So
that'd be great.
Career Day was supposed to be on the very first day that school was canceled because of the pandemic. So the first year we did it, we had 22 women from the Merrimack Valley come in and talk to the upperclassmen females at the high school. And it's just a way to kind of encourage women to get into fields that maybe isn't quite a traditional female field. Like I know Allison is in the science field, which is awesome. That's kind of what we were trying to encourage students to do if they were interested in stuff like that. Firefighters and the police officers, along with the scientists, were a really big hit that day.
Great.
So hopefully we'll get to do that again when everything's open.
Excellent.
I attended that day, and I talked with women engineers, and I thought it was fantastic. And I still have the pages and pages of notes I took from that day talking to women engineers.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so happy.
That's fantastic. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
That's great. So what I'm going to do now, just for the students and for you, is I'm just going to present a graphic real quickly, and I'm going to get it off the screen. It won't be on that screen for that long. I'm just going to pop it on there. So students, these are 10 questions. These are 10 questions that the Democratic Knowledge Project, who wrote the curriculum that we're working on, these questions are going to help you with your project. So it's called 10 questions for young change makers, and I think that obviously we have 2 change makers here on the screen with you. So these are 10 questions. Are you a change maker? 10 questions for participatory politics. And what I'm going to ask Allison and Caitlin to do is obviously not address all 10 questions, but just pick 2 questions that they thought really, really were important in the process. And I did give Allison and Caitlin these ahead of time. So number 1 is, why does it matter to me? I think both of them have already answered that question. Number 2 is, being a change maker, how much should you share? How can you make it more than yourself? How can it make, it's not just Allison and Caitlin, they're thinking beyond them. Where do they start? How can they make it easy and engaging? How do you get wisdom from the crowds? What do you learn from people? How do you handle the downfall of crowds? Is there any negativity involved in this? Are there any shortfalls? Are there any challenges when you put yourself out there? Are you pursuing voice or influence or both? How do you get from voice to change? And number 10, which in my opinion I think is the most important, in my opinion, is how do you find allies? Like, how do you find allies within the system to allow you to be able to do this? Civic allies. So I'm going to stop presenting. I'm going to come back on the screen, and I am just going to ask the both of you. Allison, you checked it out. First of all, do you think you had to answer any of those? And if so, what are 2 that you remember kind of being important for you?
Sure. I think I agree with you that the most important to me was how can we find allies? And I think the reason for that was because the image of the lone genius was so appealing to me when I was in middle school. I remember just wanting to like walk out of my room one day and have this done something awesome, right? But in real life, it's super important to talk to as many people as possible and find as much help as possible. I remember for the garden, I needed help even finding the person that was going to help me. And God, so many people helped me. Mr. Richard helped me. Miss Melnick helped me. My parents helped me. Dozens of my fellow students helped me. And it didn't take anything away from how happy and how accomplished I felt at the project's end. So I think that seeking help when possible was the most important question for me to really reflect on and answer, because theoretically, even if you could do it by yourself, it'll be better with other people on your side helping you.
And what was that terminology you said? Lone? Did you say lone wolf?
Oh, the lone genius.
Lone genius.
The idea that you can, just make it happen because you're so smart yourself.
And you want to do it yourself. So obviously it was a group of people. So just some feedback, Allison, because obviously I was able to introduce this a little bit last year in the first year of the pilot, and then the pandemic came. So I'm obviously going to be reinforcing this, and I'm hoping to see it all the way through till the end of the year. What do you think of these 10 questions? What do you think of this blueprint? Just as someone who's done it, do you think those would have been beneficial to you?
Totally. I had no idea what I was doing when I first started. I was just super aggressive, and I was like, oh, I want to get this done. How do I get this done? And I think that having a blueprint to follow and having these questions to reflect on would have really helped me to do it in a more effective and streamlined way. So I totally support it.
Great, thank you. So Caitlin, obviously I want to give a shout out to your sister, Erica, who was I did not have Allison's brother in school because of the language, but I was able to have Caitlin's sister, Erica, who's also an actress, an amazing actress. I got to see her in a couple shows, and I can't wait to follow her career. So hello to Erica. Erica was actually able to do this curriculum last year, and she seemed to really enjoy it. So for you, obviously looking at these 10 questions, just do a little reflection about, which one or two do you see as kind of important?
Yeah, so I'll start just quickly backing up both of you. The finding allies is definitely, I think it also goes with that. One of them was, where do you start? And I think that you start with finding your allies, especially when you're a kid, because people will look at you a little bit more seriously if you do have, unfortunately, if you do have an adult behind you. I know for me, whenever I was pitching my ideas to Mr. Jackson and Miss Randall, the principal and vice principal at the high school, I always made sure that I brought Mr. Sheehy, who was the head of the history department, with me. So he would sit on my side of the table at the meeting. He would be on my side. So that was always definitely a plus to help me get through it. And then once I had done a few things, then they had a little bit more faith in me, and they knew that whatever idea I had or whatever I was going to do was going to be something good. And then secondly, I want to touch on the part that said, make sure you make it engaging. Is that the question?
Make it engaging for people that you want to join you.
That's definitely something that you want to focus on. When we do Civics Day, for example, we want to make sure that all of you students are engaged, that you like it, that you have fun with it. Because if you're not having fun with it, then you're not going to take as much away from it. So with Raised Amity Day, for example, we made sure that we had a potluck with food from all different countries. We had craft stations. We had performances that you could watch. We really tried to make it less of people talking at you and more of an interactive experience. And same with Women's Career Day. So you could go up and directly talk to the people instead of just hearing a lecture.
Great. Well, obviously you're on your own in DC. You don't live with Erica anymore. What it would have been great is if I could have had Erica with you in the background to kind of talk about, because yeah, she totally would. So my students, when I'm obviously Wednesday is my first day with them remotely, and then we'll move into a hybrid format. But these students, this civics class is going to be so different than what they're used to. There's no textbook. There's no packets. It's pretty much all interactive. It requires a lot of thinking outside the box. And I think a lot of them are going to be very, very skeptical. Like, what the heck is this? Kids were like that last year. And then, of course, they eventually came along. And if you can't answer this question, that's fine. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know kids don't really go home and talk about things that they do in school that much. I know my kids really don't. But Caitlin, just, from you or your parents, what was Erica's opinion of the program compared to maybe previous social studies classes?
Yeah.
Did she give you any kind of feedback at all?
Well, I know she absolutely loved it, and I know my mom was super excited about it as well. I don't know if any parents are going to see this video, but definitely thumbs up from my mom. My sister absolutely loved it. I think the thing that she talked about the most to me was when State Representative Andy Vargas came in and they got to do a debate about one of his bills. My sister, came back and she asked me, "Oh, I said this in the debate. Was that the right answer?" Because she knows how much I love politics. And she wanted to make sure that I agreed with her, which of course I did. But I was just really proud of her for doing that. And that was something that she just absolutely loved because she's outspoken, outgoing. So that was really fun for her to get to write something and then present it to everybody.
That's great. And again, like Allison, Erica is not necessarily like a gung-ho civics history person. She's definitely, into drama and acting, and we're all into different things. Representative Vargas, who you just alluded to, he is trying to get the voting age lowered. He's trying to get the voting age lowered, possibly to 16 or 17. And Representative Vargas came in, and we actually had a hearing where kids were able to testify their opinion in front of him. And then as a follow-up, his colleague, Senator Bruce Tarr, who is against the bill, got to talk to the kids as well. So thank you for bringing that up. That's great. Well,
One fun tidbit. I had recently a webinar where Julian Castro spoke to my class online here. He's Obama's Housing and Urban Development Secretary, and he ran for president. And he was talking about how he is in favor of lowering the voting age to 16 or 17. So that's you.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. So and that's awesome that, obviously Representative Vargas has other people that are thinking about that. Well, unbelievably, we're going beyond my normal civics class period. So this will have to be 2 lessons for my students because you both did such an amazing job. Probably 3 because we'll do a follow-up with some kind of product. But just to kind of end, I think it'd be a really cool thing if you just kind of talk to the kids, obviously since middle school. Allison, from the perspective of someone who isn't necessarily gung-ho about civics, and someone like Caitlin who wants more people to get involved in civics. You're both coming from different perspectives. So if you could tell the students, in your opinion, whether they follow a course like either one of you, why do you think it's important for them to learn civics for a full year intensively for a year, as opposed to previously a U.S. history course, which, not that history isn't great, but that's what you all did. Just tell me your thoughts on an 8th grade year dedicated to civics from both of your perspectives. So Allison, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I'm not built for politics. I'm pretty sure I was actually disqualified from our 8th grade presidential race for bribery, but
you are.
I do think that affecting civic change isn't just for politicians. And as a matter of fact, I think a lot of the civic change that I've seen come about is because people are really passionate. And so I think that no matter your education level or your major, it's important to be as engaged as possible. And it's really important to be passionate because you guys are coming off like 6 years of learning about the Pilgrims, and no disrespect to the Pilgrims, but what you're learning now is not like what you've been learning in the past, right? You're learning not about what shaped our present day, but how to be an active participant in the present day. And one of the things that I used to say a lot in middle school was, when am I ever going to use this in real life? This is so dumb. And, it's true that, before I went to college, nobody came up to me and asked what was Pope Urban XIV's greatest accomplishment, right? But before I went off to college, I had to submit my application for a mail-in ballot. And so if your question is like, when am I ever going to use this stuff? The answer for a civics class is pretty often for the rest of your life. And it's important to know what you're doing. So I'm a big, big advocate for this class.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And obviously, students, this is from someone that obviously isn't completely gung-ho about history and civics and still thinks that it's important. So Caitlin, when you came in, you spoke very eloquently and passionately about your belief in civic engagement and being civic actors and playing a role in the process. So, if you could just give a parting message to my new civic students, I think it would be great for them to hear from you.
Yeah, I think Allison really hit it perfectly. It's definitely super important to be involved, to vote whenever you're old enough to vote. That is one of the most important things that you can do as an American citizen, make sure that your voice is heard. For anyone who is actually interested in going into politics, who wants to work in government, I know a lot of the people that you'll hear from coming up are the candidate themselves, where I'm someone who works more behind the scenes. So there are definitely more options for you if this is something that you're interested in. You don't have to be the physical candidate. I know I didn't even run when we had the 8th grade presidential race because that's not really my style. So there's definitely a lot more that you can do, and there's so many different ways to get involved in civics. And if anyone is interested, Mr. McGravy, as always, feel free to hand out my information if anyone wants to get involved with any of those events at the high school for their Civics in Action project, or has any questions about getting more involved in politics.
Great. Well, I think it was so important to have the first episode to be with the youth. No offense to all the politicians and no offense to all, but I think you two really are going to help me sell this. I think you both are making it a lot more real for the students, and I think it's very authentic. It's very authentic coming from the both of you, and this has been such a fun episode to film, and I'm so psyched that this was the first episode, and I can't wait to for the kids to see it and for us to experience it. So obviously, these kids are going into a middle school much different than both of you had for your 8th grade year. So I'm just going to let you both sign off just by, wishing the kids well, or, offering them, because obviously some of them will be fully remote and some of them will be hybrid. And it would be great if you could just, wish them well. And then when Caitlin's done, I'll wrap the whole thing up. So Allison, if you'd like to just have some remarks, that would be appreciated.
Sure. Online learning is hard. Online learning is going to be hard. I have faith in you that you're going to make the best of it, because that's what we do as people. We try and make the best of what we're given. And I think you should know that you have some really awesome teachers rooting for you, and they're in your corner. And I know that it's going to be hard, and I know that it might suck sometimes, but I really hope that you make the best of it and try and have an awesome 8th grade year.
Perfectly said. Couldn't have said it better myself. Caitlin, what would you like to say to the 8B 2020-21 class?
You guys are going to do great. It's going to be different. It's going to be hard. Make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. You're taking care of your mental health. Make sure that you be nice to your parents, because they're just as stressed out as you are. Be nice to your siblings, and just make the most of it. It's going to be different, but go into it with a positive attitude and you'll get something out of it.
Great. Well, again, Allison, Caitlin, thank you so much. This episode of Civics in Action with Mr. McGravy is in the books, and I thank my guests. And this was a blast. This was so great. Thank you so much, ladies.